Continuing on the Noble Eightfold Path, today I want to talk about right action. We talked about right speech 2 weeks ago, and we talked about right livelihood last week. So I wanted to revisit right action. Right action is part of the Eightfold Noble Path under the heading of ethics or ethical living. And how are our deeds in the world going to be? How are we going to show up? Today I was really very strongly thinking about the Five Remembrances. We're at a year. It's been a year since the pandemic started. It's been a year since at least it started in the United States, and in particular, maybe since it started in New York, where Beacon Zen Temple is, and many of us are. It's been a year. It's been a year since those of us living in Manhattan started hearing the sirens at nighttime. It's been a year since we all went into a kind of collective panic. What are we going to do? How is this going to affect us? It wasn't quite real yet a year ago. It's just starting to prickle around the edges. How am I going to show up? What's going to happen? Maybe it's no big deal. Maybe it's going to be a really big deal. We didn't know. It's been a year since I myself was sick with COVID. Really, I think really hitting me a year ago today. And with so much uncertainty. I think I have a cold. I think this is a cold. I'm sure it's a cold. I'm sure it's not. COVID, what anyway, how would I find out? This is a cold, but I feel terrible, but it's a cold. This is the kind of uncertainty we've been in. It's been a year since I had to close the doors to the physical building of Beacon Zen Temple. A year. Put up a sign, or had somebody did it for me because I was sick. Put up a sign on the door, moved everything online. It's been a year. It's been such a full year with so much happening. We have lost so much this year, and we have also learned so much this year. It's been a very full year. So I was thinking of the Five Remembrances. These are the Five Remembrances. I am of the nature to grow old. There is no escape growing old. I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no escape having ill health. I am of the nature to die. There is no escape. Death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. My actions are my only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. My actions are the ground on which I stand. These are the Five Remembrances. So as we look at right action today, we have a lot of fuel for how to approach that. We know what it is to be separated from those whom we love. We know what it is to go through immense change. We know what it is to be present to illness and even death. These are the things that we remember. Why do we remember them? Because they motivate us. They motivate us to practice, because they're true. So this has been a year with a very strong motivation for us. Where are we right now in that? How are we doing? The fire is burning. Our motivation this year is not just COVID. We've had so much going on. We had literally fires burning on the West Coast, in the West. We had the fire lit by the killing of George Floyd that just ignited. Fire that's been burning for a long, long time of racism that just exploded. The fire is here. Our motivation is present. What are we going to do with it? This is right action. Right action is basically showing up in a way that is beneficial and not causing harm. How can I be of benefit to all beings and not cause harm? Pretty simple. How can I be of benefit and not cause harm? Pretty simple, and yet so challenging. So think back over this year. We went through a lot. We have times in this past year where we did things that we are not proud of. Some of us big things, some of us small things. I've been thinking a lot about my practice when I was very sick. And, I decided I would just really go ahead. I felt like I was very sick, that I might not die, but I could. So I decided to practice with that, to practice as if it were the end of my life. And what I found was it's hard. It's really hard. It's hard to do. Like in my dream, I'd be like, okay, it's coming. I am so ready. My whole life I've been preparing for this. So I'm going to sit like a mountain and spontaneously burst into a rainbow. I don't know where my idea was. And what I found is it was hard to breathe. My breathing was way up here. It wouldn't go into my lower belly very easily. It was like this. I found that my mind was really foggy. I didn't have much mental clarity that moment. I found that I wasn't continuously afraid, but there were moments of fear that went pop, pop, pop. And so in that practice, preparing for the moment of death, what I relied on was habit energy. The habits of practice that I've really cultivated over years. The habits of action. Not just the sitting practice, but the habits of body, speech, and mind. that we develop through our practice. As I talked about before, we have the teachings that come to us from the outside, and we have the teachings that come to us from inside out, and we have to merge those. And we merge those by really getting our ego out of the way. So really letting go of the idea of a separate me, a separate self. It's challenging. How many of you remember times during this past year where you did things you're not proud of? Yeah, I do. I was like, whoa, there were times where I was sharp. There were times when I was lazy. There were times when I was like, I just can't do this anymore, or times when I felt panicked. And, if I have to think of one theme for this past year, it's that I'm a human and that we're all in this together. I'm a human being, and human beings live in the way that human beings live. We try our best, and we meet circumstances that are challenging, and we come up against them. And they teach us. And sometimes we mess up really in a really big way. And sometimes we mess up in a little way. And sometimes we don't really mess up, but we don't exactly show up. There are many ways that they weren't exactly a mess up, but my idea of how I would show up was different from how I actually showed up. What's an example? Doom scrolling. Who would have thunk that I would spend so much time scrolling through the news on my phone? What was I looking for? What a waste of my time. That is something that I'm not proud of from this year, and something that was so compelling. I guess I wanted some stability. I wanted to know something. All that is dear to me and everyone I love is of the nature to change. There's no way to escape this. I could have reminded myself. Maybe I did. But just knowing something and really ingesting it are two different things. Right action, not causing harm, and acting in a way that's beneficial. Two sides. So the basic core for right action are the precepts. Our rules for ethical living. The 10, and then we keep the 10 ethical aspects of the dharmas, which the Buddha awakened when the Buddha woke up. So the first, the core of the precepts are at a very minimum: not killing, not stealing, and not engaging in sexual misconduct. And these are the same across, all traditions. Not killing, not stealing, and not engaging in sexual misconduct. The Zen Precepts came to us out of the Tendai school, in which Dogen was practicing as a very young person. Underneath the precepts are the core Buddhist foundations of impermanence, egolessness, and interdependence. And these weave them together. So what are the precepts? The precepts are these. I vow not to kill. I vow not to steal, or I vow not to take what is not given. I vow not to misuse sexuality. I vow not to lie. I vow not to misuse intoxicants. I vow not to speak about the faults of others. I vow not to praise myself and put others down. I vow to be generous and not to be stingy with the Dharma or material goods. I vow not to give rise to anger. And I vow not to disparage the three treasures, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. These are the precepts. These are the grave precepts. These are the rules that we have in Zen. The precepts are, some Zen teachers call these guidelines for ethical living. They're not guidelines. They're stronger than guidelines. Guidelines implies that we can opt out. We can't opt out. But what we're going for is not some state of instant perfection. What we're going for is an engagement with them. Because as I mentioned earlier, we're human beings. And human beings make mistakes. In fact, this is our whole life. It's just one continuous mistake. So keeping the precepts isn't about attaining some state of perfection one day. Keeping the precepts is about coming back over and over to the guidelines for ethical living. Again, ingesting them through the teachings and embodying them through our practice. And this is the core principle of right action. How are we going to show up in the world? Well, we have rules, and we have rules for how to do that. We have teachings for how to do that. And then we have our practice that allows us to really make that our own and embody that. And we have the community to hold us accountable. So when we mess up, we have the community around us to remind us, hopefully with kindness, but not to give us a pass. The practice is a constant engagement over and over and over with the fact of being human. Trying to escape being human is not what we're doing here. And maybe that seems obvious to you right now, but let me phrase that in a different way. So here's some things I've heard. One day when I'm enlightened, I will instantly know how to treat all beings with compassion, because I'll be enlightened. That'll just be obvious to me. Or here's another one. When I'm enlightened on that one day, then ethical conduct will just come naturally to me. Do you see how this pulls us out of where we are? It pulls us into some magical state of perfection that has nothing to do with being a human being. Human beings mess up. And if we have not learned that this year, then I want to offer you the opportunity to reflect back over this year, because there's some really good compost that we can use. This year is where we really learned what we're all about. And I want to encourage you to use that as good information, but not to judge yourself for that. So some of us went into a panic. Oh my God. And that panic became pervasive. It just stayed. That's good information. What do I do in a crisis? I panic. So I think we know, like when we're in a panic, we can't, it's a little harder to show up for the benefit of all beings. So then what can we do? Well, fortunately, we have the practice. We can learn. We can show up. We have the Sangha, the community, to help us. We don't have to do it on our own. And we can take that data. I panic in a crisis. Okay, so what can I do? I could learn to rely on others more. I could learn to trust in the nature of the universe. I could focus on my Zazen practice as a stability. I could meet with a teacher to talk about what's going on. Everything we need is available to us for how we're going to show up. We only have to do it. So how did some of others of us show up? I'm thinking back to a lot of the protests last summer. We're like, yeah, I am going to get out there and I'm going to protest. And we did. We showed up. We showed up and we showed up and we showed up. And we supported. And when we looked inward too, right? We did a lot of work looking at our own inherent racism for people who are white, especially. So the mistake would be thinking we're done or stopping. Whoa, that 49 days, we did all that hard work back in, when was that? It was last May. Gosh, that was hard. But, I went to those protests in Beacon and just showed up and, practiced bearing witness. And I did a good job. So, do you hear the past tense there? So what we have is the chance to learn what we need to work with. So I want to offer that if working with our own inherent racism was something that you learned from, maybe there's more to learn. There's so many things. Some of us learned that we can show up for each other, that we don't have to do this on our own. We've come every morning for Zazen practice together and really, learned how to be vulnerable and share what we're going through and learn the benefit of that. When I speak from the heart, others care about me. That's also a valuable teaching. Teach us how to act in the world. How can I show up in a way that benefits others and doesn't cause harm? Sangha, the community, is a valuable resource for that. So these are the things that I've been really thinking a lot about as I reflect back on this year. So much opportunity if we use it. So I want to encourage us to don't give in to the temptation to just close the door on the year and be done with it. It's so tempting. It's been so hard. I don't want to think about that anymore. Don't become calcified around it. As we move forward, let's think about that. Let's keep that open-hearted tenderness as we move ahead, as we continue, because we're not done with this yet. Let's keep that open-hearted tenderness, that openness to reflection, to supporting each other, to living an ethical life. Let's keep the memory of those mistakes, as well as the memory of those things that we did that we feel okay about. Let's keep it and use it to keep learning and growing. This is right action. Again, a constant engagement with the fact of being human, how we show up. I am of the nature to grow old. There is no escape growing old. I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no escape having ill health. I am of the nature to die. There is no escape from death. Everything I know and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. My actions are my greatest companions. My actions are my only true belongings. My actions are the ground on which I stand. What will your actions be? Thank you. I'm going to open for questions.